but I'm going to start off by introducing myself just for 2 minutes. If you don't know me, and many of the people in the room do know me, which is always great to be in a room full of friends, but if you don't know me, my career here at Fundraising in the Scranton area goes back, sadly, quite a ways. I'd like to think of myself as being younger than I am, but it does go back quite a ways. Started off around 1981 with the Boy Scouts of America. Then I went to the University of Scranton, worked there for about 11 years. And at the University of Scranton, I had many different jobs, including corporate and foundation relations. I was assistant to the president for 3 years. I did major gift work. I did annual fund, and I was also director of development. After that time, I went down to Wilkes. I was vice president for institutional advancement there, which is being in charge of alumni development and public relations. And then after 5 years there, I came back up to the University of Scranton, was in charge of institutional advancement there, did that for about 5 years, and then went on to Marywood, where I met this young man and several other people in the room. It's always good to see your friends, like I said. And then after that, I was vice president for institutional advancement for 2 years at Lackawanna College, and then Mr. Edwards said to me, geez, I've always thought about opening a consulting firm. Would you be interested in joining me? And I said, sure, and Edwards Strunk was born. So you're going to hear a lot from me today, but I'll turn it over to Kevin to introduce himself. Kev?
Thanks. I have Paul here to have somebody call me a young man. I'm actually the elder of the two. I have a year on Paul. Unlike Paul, this is my third career, fundraising. So I started in 2000 at Marywood University. I was the assistant vice president for development there for 10 years. Left, went to Elms College, followed my former boss and president from Marywood, Sister Mary Reap, who some of you might know, and went up to Elms College, worked with her there, left there, went to High Point University, worked there for a couple of years down in North Carolina. My wife got a wonderful job here at the Wright Center, and so I moved back and decided to, that fundraising was something I would continue to do, but as a consultant. So we're here. We've been in business for, 4 or 5 years. Yep. Seems like decades. Sometimes it seems like yesterday. Not quite sure. But we have a lot of fun doing it. And so we're happy to have the opportunity to talk to you today. When we decided to do this, and we found out that they had agreed that we could, found out that it was in the afternoon after lunch, and I thought, oh, this is bad. This is bad. And then I found out who the speaker at lunch was going to be, and I read her up on her background. I go, this is really bad. So I talked to my partner. I said, what are we going to do to kind of get people's attention? Wake them up. And so I figured, I know what we'll do. We will lie to them. We lied. We lied. And we just didn't tell a little lie. It was a great big fat whopper, okay, to get you in here. And the lie is nothing about fundraising is easy. It's not easy. If you thought you were going to come in and we were going to give you the 5 rules that only consultants know and they've been hiding all this time, but we were going to give them to you for free, not happening. Not happening. Fundraising is not easy. Okay? What it is simple. It's pretty simple, but it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work, but it's simple. We're not sending somebody to the moon. We're not doing heart surgery. We're not doing brain surgery. We're not trying to come up with a cure for malaria. It's pretty simple, and it's pretty basic. So
let's talk about basic. As you noticed when I introduced myself, I can't seem to keep a job. And when I was leaving Wilkes University, we happened to have a board meeting, and one of the board members said to me, Paul, if you could give us any advice as a board when we go to hire the next person, what would you tell us to do? And what I said to him was, I said, it's actually, fundraising is sort of simple. And in truth, there are 3 things that you need to know. If anyone tells you more than this, then they're sort of just making it harder than it should be. And those 3 things are, find rich people, be nice to them, and ask them for money. Now, that's simple, right? So it doesn't work if you find poor people and you're nice to them and you ask them for money. It doesn't work. If you find rich people and you're not nice to them, that doesn't work. And if you find rich people and you're nice to them, but you never ask them for money, that doesn't work. So the key is find rich people, be nice to them, ask them for money. What we spend most of our time doing, believe it or not, is this second part, being nice to them. That's what we do. Asking people for money, I could ask everyone in this room for money and it takes about 30 seconds, right? Anyone want to give me 10 bucks? Raise your hand. No? No, okay. Maybe at the end. But no. So again, what we do is we try to convince people that we don't want to convince anyone of anything. What we want to do is invite them to join us in whatever this wonderful mission of your organization is. That is the key. But what we want to do, of course, is we want to just not go and start asking people for money, because that's too simple. People don't want to be, I think I'm actually going to say this later, so I won't say it now, but people don't want to be treated like an ATM. So, Kevin.
So let's rephrase what we're going to do, and let's talk about how to improve fundraising in your organization in 5 simple steps. You got to keep it simple, okay? It's going to be hard work. Can't take the hard work away from it. It's the nature of the beast.
I did it.
Oh, thank you. What are the 5 simple steps? And there are more steps than this. These aren't the only 5 steps. So these are 5 important steps. Your board and ways of motivating them to make gifts or larger gifts. The board is critical if you're running a 501c3. Why? Why is the board critical? Oh, and by the way, if anybody has any questions or comments, just throw them out, because we got a lot of time to cover, and we have some stuff to put in at the end if we don't cover it all, but if you've got something, shout it out. Why are they critical? With very few exceptions, the board owns the organization. They legally own it. Okay, if you're anybody here from Marywood? No? One of the few exceptions locally where the board doesn't own the organization. The congregation, through the Marywood Corporation, owns the university. And St. Joe's as well. Oftentimes in religiously affiliated organizations where you have a sponsoring organization, they'll retain ownership. University of Scranton used to be like that, but it's not that way anymore. The Jesuits gave up ownership, and the way that they are keeping control, or at least having a say in making sure the mission is fulfilled and the university stays true to its founding, is they have an X number of people on the board. I think it's 7 or 8 or whatever board members. So the board is important. Fundraising in an organization starts with your annual appeal, or your annual fund, or your operating fund, or whatever you call it. You got to professionalize it somehow. Okay? You got to professionalize your annual appeal. You have to earn the right to ask people for a gift. You can ask anybody for money, but if you haven't earned the right to ask them, it doesn't mean they're going to pay attention to you. It often means they won't pay attention to you if you haven't earned that right, if you haven't put the effort into it. That's why this is hard work. Stewardship, it's critical. How do you say thank you? How often do you say thank you? When do you say thank you? What is that thank you? Many people would say it's the first step in the next gift. If you don't say thank you, why would someone give you a second gift? And it's not just thank you, it's also spending time to make sure that they understand how their gift is impacting the people you serve. And then, how soon is too soon for the next gift or the next ask? Okay? So those 5 things. And we're going to go through those 5 things. I'll do the first, what do I got? The first 2, I think?
I think so.
And then Paul's going to take the next 2. Your board. Okay, the 3 most important roles of any board. They hire and supervise the executive director, who's then responsible for making sure that the organization is run in a legal way, and they validate the mission. And they ensure the organization has the resources necessary to fulfill the mission. They are the owners of the organization. It's their responsibility to make sure that the organization has the resources it needs to fulfill its mission. So does the board have real ownership? Paul likes to use an example of home ownership. If I own a home and it's time to put a new roof on, who's responsible for putting the roof on? Who's responsible for paying to put the roof on? Who's responsible for going out and finding the money to put the roof on? I am, because I own it. And the same thing is true with a board. of a nonprofit organization. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to put up all the money, but they're responsible for finding the money because it's their responsibility. And they do that either through their own actions or through making sure that you've got the right people, the executive director and the fundraisers and that. But it's their responsibility. Do they understand their role? When you invite board members to potential board members to come and look at the organization and meet with you, and then you invite them to sit on the board, hopefully you've got a developed relationship with them, but sometimes you don't. But whether you have a developed relationship or not, have you taken the time to explain to them what their responsibilities as board members are? Particularly with smaller organizations where you bring people onto the board that might not have been on a board before. Who's educated them about what their responsibilities are? Somebody needs to. And if you're the first organization that they come to work with, it becomes your responsibility. And one of those responsibilities is the third one. You're responsible for making sure the organization has the resources it needs to fulfill its mission. And what does that mean to you as a board member? It shouldn't be a surprise to a board member the first time you go and ask them for a gift. If you have a board member that says to you, I didn't know that I was supposed to write a check out for this. Oh, if I'd known that. And somebody didn't do their job. It can't be a surprise. Has your board or have your board members been individually asked? Who asked? Yeah, go ahead.
Can you address the issue of sometimes in that process there's not a lot of rotation on boards?
I'm sorry?
There's not a lot of rotation on boards?
It does become a problem. And it is something that the board itself is responsible for. Now, an executive director or president is certainly working with the board chair and the nominating committee to figure out a way to get more people on. But the more relevant your organization is in the community, the easier it's going to be to get new board members to come on. You should have in your bylaws something that talks about board rotation. There are organizations that have been around for a long time that started off as small grassroots organizations where you had, say, one or two individuals actually founded it, and they've been on the board. They've been on the board for 25 years. Is that right or wrong?
Let me go 2 seconds on this. It's really interesting. When I was at the University of Scranton, we had where the board rotated, I think it was every 8 years. But when I got to Wilkes, I don't quite remember exactly what their bylaws are, but I think they're basically permanent trustees. Every once in a while, I guess they have to go for re-election, but they can always be re-elected. And in fact, they are until a certain age, and I think that age was 72. And what I discovered was the level of ownership of Wilkes was more than the level of ownership at the University of Scranton, which I found very interesting. The people at Wilkes, they would write very large checks. They just really owned that place, and they knew it, and they knew it was up to them, and they sort of really got it. So someone had done a very good job of training them. You know, one of the things Kevin and I talked about when we were putting this together, you know, boards are so important, and boards have so much jurisdiction that if you wanted to, a board could change the mission of your organization. So if your organization had been healthcare the entire time, all of a sudden they could decide to become a bowling alley. They could. Doesn't mean they're going to get money for it, but they own the organization. They own the mission. They own your organization. And again, that does come with responsibility, and it just depends on how they take that responsibility. Sometimes they do write really big checks because they own it. Sometimes they don't. I think too, what you see a lot, especially in our area, are family seats on boards. You know, where it's always been the Jones seat or the Smith seat or whatever. So it's sort of the same thing.
So do they have to be, thanks, Paul. Do they have to be individually asked? Yes, absolutely. Who asks them? I don't know. Depends on your organization. Ideally, it's another board member. So if you have a chair, let's say you have a development or an advancement committee on your board, the ideal person, if not the board chair themselves, is the chair of the advancement committee. That's their responsibility. Sometimes board members are a little hesitant to talk to other board members, and so it could become, if you're large enough and you've got a vice president for fundraising or development or whatever, it could be that person. Or it could be the president or the executive director. Somebody has to ask. Okay? Good board members know that they're responsible to give. But you have to ask them. If for no other reason, out of common courtesy, that it's not expected. A good board member will oftentimes beat you to writing the check out, which sometimes is not a good thing because you're going to ask them for more than what they would write the check out for, but that's okay. And is it every year? Absolutely, it's every year. I don't know, did the organization, we only run every odd year, so we don't need money. You need money every year. So you have to ask them every year. They deserve that. If you respect them, they have a right to have you ask them, to expect you to ask them. Not just we, as Paul said, treat them like an ATM. We made jokes about, find rich people, ask them. You can put it in a lot. I would tend to be more wordy. Paul cuts right to the chase and find rich people, be nice to them, ask them for money. Board members deserve to be asked. It's important. You ask them. And here's something that's very important. It's not just about the money. It's not just about the money. I'll give you 2 quick examples from organizations, one that I worked with and Paul worked at, and another one that was a client of ours. The largest private donor ever at Marywood University, not the congregation, they're by far the largest donor to the university, was a gentleman whose family had absolutely no connection to the school. Didn't go there, wife didn't go there, kids didn't go there, cousins, nobody went there. I don't know that the person had ever been on campus. They were affluent, they were good people, this couple, who wanted to give back to the community. They just sold their business. And they were determined to give back to the community, and they wanted to find one place where they could make a significant impact. And they were looking around. And a then current board member at Marywood, very close friends with them, and knew that that was the case. And knew that their responsibility was to make sure the organization had the resources it needed to fulfill its mission. And so what they do? They invited that person to come up and have lunch with the president, just to talk about the school. Most expensive lunch that couple ever had. Ever had. And the university, and more importantly, the students that it served and the community that it served benefited from that. So that board, the original board member that invited them, they were from a very generous family, didn't have those type of resources, but they knew that those resources were out there, and they found them because they knew it was their responsibility as a board member. Another quick example of a client of ours in Connecticut, smaller social service organization, $3.5 million a year budget, but they were doing a capital project. And I don't know about any of your organizations. Actually, there's 2 billionaires on that board. But I don't know, you guys probably have 4 or 5, but there were 2 billionaires on that board, but neither one was going to they made very generous gifts, but they weren't going to make the lead gift. And I think the lead gift was $1.5 million, the $8 or $10 million project. So it wasn't coming from any of the board members. The board chair, who understood what a leader does, since he personally couldn't write the check, he took it on as a responsibility for himself to go out and find the gift. And he did. He went out and found an individual in that community who happened to live in that community, who was very philanthropic, had been the CEO of a major corporation. He and his wife had decided that they were going to give their money away while they were alive. They wanted to direct where it was going. They wanted to see it in action. And you could go on many a big university campus in this country and see their name on buildings. The president of the board was an accountant in the community, knew these people, talked to the gentleman, called him up, talked to him, invited him down, looked at the project, was there, an hour and a half? Hour and a half, executive director and the board chair talking to him, looked him in the eye and said, would you consider making a gift? He asked, what's the naming gift? $1.5 million. He said, okay, done. And I think they had the check, 2 weeks later?
Something like that.
One check, $1.5 million, here you go. Because a board member understood that it didn't have to be their resources, but they were responsible for making sure the organization, the institution, had the resources it needed to fulfill its mission. Your board is exceptionally important to you. It doesn't make any difference whether you got 5 people on the board or 35 people on the board. If you're the fundraiser or you're the executive director, you need to figure out how to work with that group, how to enlarge it if you can, how to get new blood on that group. But that's one of the board's responsibilities. So the board is one. Professionalizing your operating appeal. This is a hard question, okay? But every organization should look at this, regardless of how big or how small you are. Should you farm out your annual appeal? And when I say farm it out, should you hire a vendor to come in and run your annual appeal for you? And this is actually, if no, if you don't farm it out, you have to develop a plan yourself and stick to it. Okay? Your plan should include a 3-layer approach. You should be looking at every possible gift to your operating fund. Excuse me, small gifts, medium-sized gifts, large gifts, and that's relative to your organization. A small gift for many here could be $5 or $10. A small gift for some could be $100. Large gift could be $1,000, it could be $500, it could be $5,000, whatever it is for your organization. There has to be a component in that plan that looks at each one of those groups, because to be candid, you're going to treat them all with respect, you're going to ask them all, you're going to ask them in different ways, you're going to have different people ask, but you're going to ask. Paul will tell you, and he likes to use this when we talk to clients, if you're going to ask him for $1,000, you better sit down across the table, look him in the eyes, and ask him for $1,000.
I want lunch.
He wants lunch too, yeah, he typically asks for lunch. Now, there are some people where if they don't have time they have enough money and they're giving a lot, they're very philanthropic, and they don't have time to sit down and have lunch with every person that's asking them for $1,000. So it's relative to your organization. It might, for your organization, it might be a cup of coffee for everybody giving you $100. I don't know what it is. You got to figure it out for your organization, put that into your plan, and stick to the plan. So look at the various levels. If the answer's yes, you're going to farm it out, find a vendor. There are people locally in northeastern Pennsylvania that do this. Sister, do you guys do yours in-house or farm it out now? You farm it out. So you have a contracted vendor, right?
We send out the copy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh yeah. You work with them very closely, and yes.
They send back. So
Right. 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 So you have to figure out what's best for your organization. Is it going to cost you money? Sure it is. But running an annual fund, if you're going to run it right, takes a lot of time. Takes a lot of focus. It's going to cost you money. You got to do the mailings, it's going to cost you money anyway. So you have to sit down and try to figure out which is the most cost effective for your organization. But you have to do it. The reason you have to do it is the operating appeal, the annual fund, whatever you want to call it, has 2 goals. The first is securing operating resources you need to run the organization on an annual basis. Most organizations, their annual fund's built into their budget. So you're spending it as it's coming in. And if you've got budgeted $100,000 for your annual fund and you only bring in $75,000, you've now got a $25,000 hole in your budget. Okay? So there's that. But also, and from a long-term perspective, more importantly, the annual fund is the tool that you use in many cases to identify and cultivate potential major gift donors. There are people that come into an organization at a level way up here, and the first gift you ever see, like the guy who put the name on the building up in Connecticut, is a large check. But most people that become major gift donors over time start off as annual fund donors. First check is for $100 or $50 or $25. Over time, they will self-identify. I'd like to do more. I've got more. I'd like to be on your board. They'll wave big red flags in front of you. They'll do all kinds of things to get your attention. Your job is to begin the cultivation process with that first gift. And it usually starts in the annual fund. And then look for signs. If somebody goes from giving you $50 a year, they give you $50 a year every year for 5 years, and the next year, without being asked, there's a check for $5,000 that comes in. That person trying to tell you something. Could be that mom just passed away, I got this money, she loved the organization, here's $5,000, that's the end of it. Some people might have just sold their business. And now they have the wherewithal to do something more than write an annual check. Paul, annual checks to the annual fund typically come from where?
Operating.
Operating resources, the paycheck. Major gifts come from where?
Comes from your savings.
Savings, capital resources. If somebody's going to pry open the capital resources bucket, they'll give you a signal. Oftentimes. Not always, but oftentimes. But you got to be watching for it. They'll do something that does that.
Okay, so earning the right to ask for a significant gift. I love that term, and we use it a lot when we talk to our clients because it's easy to ask for money. I used to have a boss, and I won't tell you which one because it's in the neighborhood here. This is a much easier presentation to make when you're far away. But I used to have a boss that was willing to ask anyone for $1 million. And they did. They asked practically everyone they ran into for $1 million. And you know what? They never got it because the person never had the $1 million. So was the ask ever for real? No, it's easy to ask. I mean, will you give me $1 million for her charity? Probably not, you know. I mean, it's an easy request to make. So how do you earn the right to ask someone for a significant gift? I think everyone in this room, if you go up to Marywood or you go to Keystone or you go to the University of Scranton, you walk around and you see the buildings and you see the names on the buildings, you go, how did this happen? It didn't happen overnight. It was not one request. It was not one day. It was not a lucky home run. You know, obviously Kevin talked about a couple lucky home runs, so they do happen. But they are so exceptionally, they're not the norm. They're just not the norm. So what is the norm? And Kevin mentioned this. You start a relationship and you begin it and you keep it going. Rich people, how many people here like to eat chocolate, let's say? Anyone here chocolate eaters? Yeah, I had a candy bar over in the vending area, or the vendor exhibit area. Now, if you know, when I was a kid, people would come with the boxes with the candy bars in them. So if the person comes with the candy bar every week, is that okay to your house? And asks you to buy a candy bar every week? Maybe. How about if they come every day? Is that okay? How often is too often? And I like candy. I'm a big candy guy, right? So how often is too often to ask? And that is part of the art of fundraising. And it's really almost impossible to know unless you know the person. So tomorrow we're going to talk a lot, I'm going to talk for like 10 minutes, something called the Platinum Rule. And the Platinum Rule basically is, what's the Golden Rule? Does everyone know? Treat people the way you want to be treated, right? The Platinum Rule is treat people the way they want to be treated. Kind of a modest little change there, but do people want to be treated like ATMs? Do they want to be, whenever you have a need, boy, you're there for them every time? Probably not.
Just throw in one more anecdote here from a client that we have at a major university in the Midwest, public university. And they have a Catholic center on the university campus. Actually, I think maybe the second or third largest Catholic student population in the country is at this public institution. And the priest who runs the parish that runs the Catholic center there decides that he wants to build, that's a great idea, he wants to build a Catholic dorm for Catholic students, and he's going to have all kinds of neat stuff in it. And they have a great parish, but he wants to build this. And the school is going to give him the land. 99-year lease for $1. I mean, and this is valuable land. It's right smack dab in the middle of campus. They're going to give him that because they need to build dorms and they can only build so many, and if you're going to do it, and here's the land, but build the dorm. The bishop, his bishop, said, I'll pay for the dorm part because that'll self-amortize. Students come in, they pay, I'll put the diocese money up to get that part done. You've got to go out and raise the other money for all the other niceties you want in this building. All important. Meeting rooms, a new chapel, all kinds of things. $17 million was that portion of the deal, what the pastor had to go out and raise. He had a development officer that Paul and I did our master's degree together in philanthropy and development, and one of our classmates was the development director at this parish. And so she worked with Paul in developing this presentation to make to the very first donor they were going to go talk to.
This is like 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. And that person was exceptionally wealthy, exceptionally philanthropic, either was then or had been a board member at this major public institution and had names on things all over the place on this campus. And so the presentation was to ask for $1 million. Now, this is somebody who, when they were on campus, they'd come to Mass, they were involved. $1 million. Paul helped the person put the presentation together. They take it back. They're driving from this school to Chicago. It's close enough, they're driving. And the priest, God bless him, decides, I'm not going to ask him for $1 million, I'm just going to ask him for the whole thing. He thought, I'm going to be brave. I'm going to ask him for $17 million. And he gets there and he asks him for $17 million. And
So they basically decided not to build the building. That's the end of the
end of the story.
End of the story.
But if he had asked him for $1 million, he probably would have given it. And eventually, he probably would have put his name on the building, maybe for $5 or $6 million. He could have written a check for $17 million. He didn't want to be treated like an ATM.
So the next point is, people always ask, where do you find the rich people? Right? That's the key. That's the key. Where are these rich people? Well, the truth is, they're hiding in your database. They're hiding in everyone's database. If you go to your database right now and you take a good look at it, you're going to find someone there who can probably do more. So I look at this and I say, look for people, it means amongst your board, your donors, volunteers, and their friends. So why do I say amongst the board, donors, volunteers? Because they already like you. They already know you. You don't have to go out and start a whole new relationship. Building a relationship from $0 to $1 million, that could be a 10-year process, right? But if they already know you, you're short-circuiting the process. That's like fantastic. And are they there? The answer is probably. There's many ways to kind of look at people and all this. I think one of the most interesting gifts that was ever given to the University of Scranton was given a long time ago by a guy named Frank Reddington. Frank had a business here in town. He sold church furniture. He sold pews and stuff. And he sold them all over the country. And no one knew he had any money. He lived in a modest neighborhood, and well, he dies, and in his will, he leaves the University of Scranton $3 million. How did that happen? He used to go for a walk at lunch around the square, and he would run into one of the priests from the U, and they'd sit on a bench and they'd talk about sports or whatever, and the next thing you know, guy dies, $3 million. That's not common. It's not common. But so anyway, look in your current databases. So the next part is cultivation. There's a college in San Diego called the University of California at San Diego. It's a relatively new school. It's probably 50 years old, 60 years old, something like that. And yet it has one of the strongest research components of any colleges in America right now. And what they've done there, or what the fundraising people there did, which is sort of amazing, they got to know the people in the community, and they would go to a wealthy person, a wealthy man or woman, and say, so what's your dream? What's your dream? You know, we're a college, we're big, we got the University of California behind us, we can do whatever your dream is. And people would come in and say, well, I can see, trying to cure cancer, I can see a heart institute, I can see a medical school. And then the fundraising guy would say, we can do that, but we need your money. Well, this is in La Jolla, California, which is different than Scranton. And over a period of time, they ended up getting all of these items. It's sort of remarkable. It's a remarkable place. It's a remarkable story. But again, the first visit was not tell us your dream. The first visit was not give us $10 million. That was over a long period of time. Let me show you what we've accomplished in the past. One of the things, and I might use this story again tomorrow, so if I do, just forget about this story. A couple of, the way most people want to be treated on that end is like a good, close friend. So a few years ago, I had a pretty big surgery, well, big for me. And I decided that I would tell the people that were closest to me before the surgery, I was going to have the surgery, And then my other friends, the acquaintances, I just tell on Facebook, right? So I'm driving home, put it on Facebook, life is good. And I started thinking about presentations like this, and how did I choose those 30 people that I was going to tell? Who were those 30 people that were close enough to me that I wanted to make sure that they knew all about this? And that's who your major donors are. Think about them this way. Major donors are the people that you're going to have surgery, the 30 people you're going to tell. The other, I don't know how many friends I have on Facebook. Let's say I got 400. The other 400, they're going to learn on Facebook. You know, and it's all okay. So how do you treat your people? How do you cultivate them? You know, a plant during the holiday season, probably not it. A newsletter, no. A newsletter is Facebook. You've got to go talk to them. You've got to go talk to them. So the goal is to get people to understand how to meet the needs of the organization. So if you want them to help you, they've got to know what your goals are. They've got to agree with your goals. They've got to think your goals are important. They have to make your goals their goal. One of the truths of being a good fundraiser is you know you've done a good job if during the dedication of the building, the center, the room, the whatever, the donor cries. If the donor is so moved that they cry during the dedication of that facility, then you've done a good job because you've matched a good donor with a good project. Stewardship. So, find rich people, be nice to them, ask them for money. Be nice to them, ask them for money. Be nice to them, ask them for money. That's stewardship. You've got to not just stop talking to people once they give you the check. Whether the check is $5, $500, $5,000, or especially if it's $5,000, $500,000, you've got to keep the conversation going. There's an old business adage, I think we've all heard this. It's 4 times easier to get a client to make a second purchase than the first if you treat them right. And I think that is sort of the way to do it. Do what you promised with your donor's resources. So have you ever been in a situation where, and by the way, this has happened in my experience, which is sort of hard to imagine. Someone's agreed to give you $1 million. And for that, you've agreed to build X building. And then you just kind of decide, don't want to build X building anymore. And so you try to turn that person to another project. That kind of shows poor planning. It shows poor this, poor that, poor everything. So you've got to actually follow through. I mean, I guess you don't have to, but it's best if you follow through. If you say you're going to build a center for lost puppies, then there better be a center for lost puppies somewhere, or whatever it's going to be. Because if not, then why would the donor ever give you a second gift? It seems like common sense, right? You've got to do what the donor asks. We have a client right now, and this client wants to put money into an endowment to create scholarships for the organization. The organization is not sure they want an endowment, but they've taken the money. And so now we're trying to get them to go with the local foundation, the community foundation, much like the Scranton Area Foundation. And everyone's sort of agreed to this in principle, but they still haven't just pulled the trigger. It's a very interesting dilemma, and one of the board members has a problem with it, and that's sort of what's holding things back. So they've got the gift, they haven't given it to the foundation, so they're not quite doing what they said they were going to do with the money. We're going to push them. It's all going to happen in the next couple of weeks, but this is sort
hopefully before the donor calls and wants to know how
hopefully
it's going.
Before the, yeah, exactly. But so it's all, again, by the way, the organization's a wonderful organization doing great work. But this is sort of this thing that's just sort of hanging out there, and those things kill you. And the last one, of course, is to make sure the person knows that the money they've given you is being used for the right thing, what they want it used for. So, okay.
How soon is too soon to ask for another gift? We get caught up, I talked before about the annual fund, and it's about developing a plan, a schedule, and sticking to the schedule no matter what, because once you get behind in it, then it just, everything gets out of whack. You got to stick to it. You have to keep in mind, though, from a donor's perspective, it's their schedule, not yours. It's my money. It's not your money. You want it to become your money. It's still my money. It's about my schedule, okay? That's why if it was all about your schedule, you could do one annual fund mailing a year. Everybody would send the check in, and you'd have postage for one mailing. But that's not the way it works, because it's about their schedule. So you have to do 2, 3, 4 mailings a year and pay for those mailings until you get all the gifts you're going to get in. It's about the donor's schedule. The same thing is true about a second gift. And how do you determine what the donor's schedule is? It's all about, and it's always all about, relationships. You have to develop the relationship with the donor. You have to ask the donor. The donor will tell you. Even if you don't ask, the donor will often tell you. But you have to have the relationship where they trust you, particularly as you get into bigger gifts. Now, it's easy to sit and write somebody, for me, it's never easy to sit and write somebody out a check, but it's easy to write somebody out a check for $50. If I had $50,000 to give to somebody, that's a much more difficult decision to make. It's about the donors and their schedule and what's right for them, and the way you get to know that is by developing a relationship. It is absolutely dumbfounding what people will tell you once you develop a relationship with them as a fundraiser at an organization that they love. Whether it's a hospital that took care of their mother or saved their life, or the university that they went to, or the private high school that they went to, an organization that they love, once they understand that you, to a certain extent, are that organization to them, they'll tell you all kinds of stuff you don't want to know. But they'll also tell you things that you desperately need to know. And one of them is, when's the right time to ask for another gift? Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes. For some, it's going to be a monthly gift. Others, it's a special project. I'm not going to give it to you unless it's exactly what I think is important, what I think you need, what I'd like to see done in my community that answers the need that I see amongst people that I care about. And for still others, it's a single gift from their estate. It's about the donor. It's not about what you need. It's about what fits in with the donor. You can help them along if you have a deeply developed relationship in getting there. You can talk to them about it. You can work with them in doing this. But it's all about their schedule. Do they have the ability to handle monthly commitments? I can give you $50, I can give it to you one time. No, don't ask me about doing it $50 a month. I'm not going to do it. Facebook, the big thing now is, you give and let's make this a month. No, I don't want to make it a monthly thing. If I did, I would have asked. I don't want to do it. Here's probably for me, well, we'll do the last one. Do you have a simple planned giving strategy for your organization? Doesn't make any difference how big your organization is. I truly believe that. Doesn't make any difference. I was on the board and then eventually the president of a small organization in Scranton that no longer exists. Actually, it's merged in with another organization. We had a part-time development person. But they developed a little endowment, because a person left money to them in their estate. And it was a big chunk of money. And the board said, rightfully, we could spend this money tomorrow just like that. There's enough need in the community. But what happens to the community that we serve when all of a sudden we don't get these grants that we depend on? We need to start building up something that we can fall back on for at least a year or 2 years until we can readjust where our revenues come from. And that's what they did. If you're a huge organization, endowment becomes everything. Harvard became Harvard because of their endowment. Let's be candid. What is it now? I don't know, $40 billion? I don't know what it is.
Oh, no.
80? Well, the market now, yeah.
Like that, yeah.
Anyway, they became Harvard as we know it because of their endowment. Started back in 16, whatever it was, when they got their first gift in.
Can you define what you're considering a simple plan giving strategy?
Sure, absolutely. So if you're a small organization, you don't have a plan giving officer, you don't have to worry about going out and learning about CRUTs and CRATs, and there's all kinds of different plan giving instruments. Develop a good relationship with a decent bank that has a trust department. Find out what they'll do for you, find out what they charge, and you've got yourself all the vehicles that you need for a planned giving program. Then it's about talking to people about the organization, how important it is to the community, and what do they think is going to happen to the organization when people like them pass on and are no longer able to support it. Everybody here know, I don't think I'm telling any secrets out of turn because it's all public. You could see it in the annual report. Everybody here remember Monsignor McGowan? Sure, who doesn't? Wonderful man. Gave X number of dollars a year to Marywood, where he was on the board, just like all the other schools that he was on the board for, X number of dollars. And so the vice president that we worked for at the time said to him, and all the other big, larger gifts came through the foundation, the charitable fund. But he said to him one day, he said, Monsignor, you know, when you're gone, people like you that give this money every year, and large annual Presidential Society level gifts every year, what happens when you pass on and you're no longer there to make that gift? Would you consider leaving a gift in your estate that we could put into the endowment that would generate the income that would match that gift? And your gift will go on for as long as this institution stays open. And he said, sure, I'll do that. So
let me just throw this out. Even more easily than going to talk to a banker, if you have anything you're mailing, anything, at the very bottom of it, put down, have you remembered in your will?
Yep.
That's it. Or in your estate plans.
As far as your plan and how to operationalize it, it can be as simple as that.
Something like 90% of all estate gifts are just straight gifts in people's wills. Then there's crits and crats and cruts and all that other stuff, but that's truly for really wealthy people who have financial advisors, and they'll be able to, you know, figure it out on their own. In this case, all you want to do is keep on planting the seed time and again. Have you remembered your organization in your will? That's simple.
So I think this last one. Do you know your donors and what their passions are? When you can find the intersection of your donors' passions and your mission, you're going to maximize the opportunity for a gift from that individual. Their passion, where does it intersect your mission? You're going to maximize the opportunity for a gift. And depending on the individual, that maximization could be $5,000, could be $50,000, $500,000, or $5 million. Find out what they're passionate about. And then tell them how your organization can fulfill that passion in the community. That's important. So, a couple of extra things here, real quick, and then we're going to open up to questions. 10 things to remember about fundraising. Number 1, focus on where the money is. Okay? And this number changes from time to time, but this is essentially about it. Philanthropic money in the United States, 80 to 85% comes from individuals, the rest comes from corporations and foundations, and it's somewhat evenly split. So if you sit back and say, Kevin, we don't have time to go after these individuals because you're talking about relationships that take a long time. We're really focused on corporations and foundations that are doing with our grant. We have great grant writers and doing it. And by the way, that's where 85% of our money comes from. My suggestion might be that's because that's where you're spending all your time. You got to go where the money is. And the money, philanthropically in the United States, comes from individuals, the vast majority of it. Okay? We talked about this before, about the ownership of a home and the board. The board owns the institution. The board has a fiduciary, a legal responsibility to make sure the organization has the resources it needs to fulfill its mission. Never forget that. And you have to educate people if they've never been on a board before. You have to educate them. Don't let it be a surprise when you ask them for the first gift. And you can work through almost anything with a donor, with a benefactor. Their relationship with the organization, their knowledge of and commitment to the mission, anything. How they can become the best advocate in the community. The one thing you can't work on with a donor is what? How much money they have. That you can't change. You have to know what people's resources and capacity is so that you can focus on the right people. It doesn't mean that you don't ask everybody for a gift, but if you only have so much time, if you only have so many people working for the organization, you only have so many fundraisers, you can't be spending all your time on people that can give you $100. You got to figure out who can give you $10,000 and $100,000. Everybody is treated with respect, everybody is asked, but you don't do it in the same way. You just can't. They have to have the resources necessary beforehand.
Okay, so these two, I think we've kind of hit a lot of these points, so I'll go through them real quickly, because I think your questions are probably as important as what I'm going to say. Number one, fundraising is all about relationships. Number two is really interesting. A lot of times, so an organization goes out and decides to hire a fundraiser, and a lot of times they get really excited if after 6 months the $1 million gift hasn't come in. Sadly, in the United States, the average tenure of a fundraiser is 18 months. 18 months. And why is that? Pressure. In my opinion, one person's opinion. They're put under a lot of pressure to make a lot of money really quickly. And again, what I said is, you walk around the University of Scranton campus, Marywood's campus, Keystone's campus, Johnson's campus, what you're going to see is a lot of names on buildings. That didn't happen in 6 months. None of those happened in 6 months. They happened over a period of years, perhaps even decades. So relationships, if you can have a long-serving fundraiser, in fact, it's funny, today, we were talking today to an individual down in Atlanta that became close friends with the three of us, and we have this sort of friendship that is sort of this odd feeling about this individual. So again, we not only don't treat him like an ATM, maybe we're too close to him to be a little bit honest, but it's good nonetheless. As Kevin was talking about, the signals they'll send you, there you go. And again, we also talked about where the money comes from. It's there and there. And, oh, annual fund events. Who here does annual fund events? Who here has a golf tournament? Who here has an annual dinner? Who here loves all of it? Yeah, right. Lots of work, lots and lots of work. If you can charge enough, then you can make a lot of money on it. If you cannot charge enough, and in Scranton, Pennsylvania, it's hard to charge enough, then they become sort of friend-making activities as much as they are fundraising activities.
Who makes the most money on a golf tournament? The golf course. Never forget it. In most places. What's that? Yeah.
So I will throw this out. The University of Scranton has an annual dinner in New York at the Pierre Hotel. They bring in about $1.5 million a year. But they charge everyone to go a lot more money than you can do in Scranton. And by the way, notice it's in New York. Why is it in New York? Find rich people. Yeah, right? Okay. If you want advice, ask them for money. If you want money, ask them for advice. So what am I talking about? If you've got a project and it is all said and done and you know exactly what you want to build, why you want to build it, where it's going to go, how it's going to go, what it's going to do, then you go ask someone, tell me, can you give me $1 million? They might go, maybe, I don't know. But if you go and say, hey, we've got this problem. Can you help me solve this problem? I got this problem. I've got this thing I need to do. Can you help me with this? They're going to go, oh, you need that? Huh. Well, you know, my friend Joe has a big building and, you know, all of a sudden, maybe you get what you need. Maybe it's not exactly the way you planned it, but maybe you get exactly what you wanted. So that's sort of the end of our formal presentation, but we love questions. So questions. Yes?
You mentioned look at your data. So we're a small, new nonprofit. What kind of data? How should we keep it? What should we collect?
Okay, so this is going to be very sad. So we're dealing with an organization right now, and they're a great organization. Their work they're doing is first class. And so they have about 6 people or 10 people that they can ask $10,000 for, and they know everything about it. So then we started looking at the next level of people, which is like maybe $2,500 and up. They don't have phone numbers. They don't have the people's phone numbers.
Got a database, but there's no phone number in there.
No phone number.
Can't call, can't set up an appointment, can't.
I mean, that's like amazing. No phone numbers, and you know, even they do have some emails, but even those are pretty sparse. You know, they've lived from special event to special event, and at the special events, they've not collected the right kinds of information, and they've not even noticed who's in the room. So if you have your big dinner, or if you have a special event of any kind, who's in the room? Who's in the room? And who's the answer to that? You know, it's very interesting. Who's in the room? So.
That's great, thanks.
There are lots of ways to get that information. Have a raffle, have whatever. You know, you got to fill in your name, your phone number, your email address.
Throw your business card in.
Because if you win, we want to get back to you.
Throw your business card in.
Then you got it. Yeah, throw your business card in. Lots of simple ways to do it.
But you need good data.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you're cultivating these relationships with these major donors or potentially major donors, like, who is doing that? Is it the board member? Is it the executive director? Is it the fundraiser?
Yes.
Yes and yes.
And what kind of conversations are you having? Is it just like chit chat, or are you like?
I'll give you.
Meet them?
Let me give you I've got two favorite stories. And the one is a little bit long, so I'll try to keep it short. Sorry.
Please.
He's heard them all.
I probably heard it.
Oh, he's
22
definitely heard
times.
it. You've definitely heard it.
In fact, I can finish it for you. Go ahead.
So years ago, I was at the University of Scranton, and someone came up to me, and I was 27, and whispered in my ear. This was the head of the New York chapter, and at that point, the New York chapter had one event a year. It was a Christmas party. It was 300 young kids spilling beer on each other, in suits, all dressed up. It was great. It was the second Friday of December. So the head of the chapter, who was probably about 40, comes up to me and says, "You need to get an appointment with," and he mentions a person's name. Okay, so a couple months go by. We get the appointment with them, and I was there, and the person was the president of a company, and I don't want to tell you too much information about him, but because he's still alive. But the company owned the rights to cell phone towers before cell phones were a thing. He ended up selling the rights he and his partners and stuff, for $3.4 billion, I think, something
Lots
like that.
of billions. Yeah.
To AT&T. So this guy, go to visit him, say, "Can I have an appointment?" He says, "Sure." So I go to visit him, and I'm sitting there, and he's the president of the company, but there's a CEO or something above him, chairman of the board above him. And all of a sudden, the chairman of the board voice comes on the cell phone, or the phone, you know, the intercom, and says, Paul, the people he knew I was from the Catholic college. I'm 27. This guy's probably 50, 45. The president or the people from Hustler magazine just called. They want to know if you want to renew your subscription. Well, he started to laugh. I started to laugh. The guy on the phone started to laugh. And we sort of had made a bond. And he was a guy that ultimately I felt like I could call at any time. We had meetings in his conference room, which was in the top floor of the GM building, overlooking Central Park, you know, like real swank kind of place. And he was just the nicest man in America. Well, we knew that we were building a big building, and we knew he had the resources. So after 10 years, or probably less than that, maybe 7 years, he had already been like on the board of trustees. He had been, again, the head of the annual fund. He had gotten some awards. We sort of did all the formal stuff we could do, but the relationship was really 27-year-old Paulie Strunk. You know, this was not the president's relationship, although he knew the president loved him. It was me. I was the manager. I was the relationship manager for this person. And ended up, his name's on one of the buildings over there, you know? And, you know, there's other stories like that too. And is it because I'm so swell? I'm not that swell. I'm okay, you know. I just am a nice person, and I go to see people, and you know, half of the job of being a good fundraiser is literally doing the job, which is going to see people, being nice to them, remembering birthdays. This is terrible. Go to funerals. Go to the occasional baptism or something too. Funerals, like probably 10 baptisms for every one funeral in the importance count. You know, go to see people when they're in need. Go to see people when they need you. Don't forget them. Don't forget them. They're just normal, rich people are just normal people. You know, they just want to be respected and loved.
But something to keep in mind is that the donor will oftentimes let you know who needs to be handling this relationship. It was that person's personality that liked Paul. If they didn't like Paul, and I don't know, when you asked him for the gift to name the building, I'm assuming the president went along. Maybe he didn't.
No, I did not ask.
Okay, so it depends on who's doing it. And there's a lot of strategy in this. This becomes a combination of the art and science of fundraising. Because sometimes you only get one chance to ask for that big gift. And you got to really think about who's the best person to ask. You know, when, where, for what, how much. The 5 R's of fundraising. Right amount, right time, right person. Yeah. Each person, you have to think about them individually.
So, other questions?
What about corporations?
So corporations give about 7.5% of all the money in the United States. Most of them have a formal giving program. Not most of them. Some of them have a formal giving program. So if you're in a corporate headquarters town, which Scranton is not one, if you're in Pittsburgh, let's say, there's a lot of corporate headquarters in Pittsburgh, you're going to do really, really well asking corporations for money. Most of the corporations here would have like a pooled fund, and they would usually ask the employees where they want to put it, and there's a whole bunch of different things. I've been very fortunate. I did get a very large gift from a corporation when I was at Lackawanna, but that was sort of just, I don't want to say it was lucky, but it was lucky.
It was a unique circumstance.
It was a unique circumstance.
It was a corporation that was really trying to do something in the community that some people had objections to, but it was important. It was a lot of money, and they saw it as not philanthropic, I wouldn't think. It was more of how do we make good in the community so that people like us. Yeah. So, you know, locally around here, you can get $2,500 out of Walmart or whatever. You're not going to get $250,000 out of the Walmart Corporation. That's not happening.
No, you can get usually about $500 out of Walmart.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if we have five minutes.
Yeah. Yes.
So. Yes. Peg.
So we're fairly good at identifying the likeness of faith. Okay? But our concern is as they die off, is trying to engage that younger donor.
Those pesky donors, they keep dying on you, don't they? It's terrible.
Oh, the funerals, yeah, you can do the funerals. So the question, like that's I think where a lot of people in the industry are starting to struggle with is how do you engage younger donors, because they have a different philosophy.
Young donors tend to, they are very interested in outcomes. And so if you go back to place, and again, I'll pick on the University of Scranton since I worked there for a long time. Is anyone here from the University of Scranton before okay. So they used to have the annual fund, and the annual fund was the big deal. I mean, holy cow, big deal. I mean, that's where all the money went, is the big black hole. Young donors don't want to give money to the big black hole. They just don't. I don't know exactly what the age group is, but they want to know where the money's going, and then they want to report on how you used it. And they want to make sure that it's all very, very well done. And that's a whole new change. It's a whole new change. You know, we used to be, when I was, again, a long time ago when I was working at Scranton, at the U, you know, we'd go and we would do these phone-a-thons, and the money would just come in. Like, it would just literally come in. And there was no accountability at the other side. I mean, the University of Scranton is a very accountable place. It's all, nothing got stolen or anything. It was all very good. But at the same time, I would think the donors, if you're going to get money from people, they're going to want to know how it's used. So if you actually say to them that you're going to do a scholarship, they're going to want to know the details of the scholarship. Not just that it's a scholarship, but who's getting it, why did they get it, how did you have a committee, who made the decision. You know, they want to be involved. They want it to be their gift. They're not, the World War II generation and even the baby boomers to a degree, they were much more
It was a civic obligation. Yeah, you got to do it.
civic
It's the right
obligation.
thing to do.
Yeah. Now it's a
The other thing to keep
Gift
in
for a
mind
project.
about donors dying off is particularly large, big donors. Oftentimes they have families. So my question to you is, what have you done to engage their family? Or was it just mom and dad?
No, sometimes it's family, unfortunately.
Sure, they could be the last person in line, whatever. Or the kids don't live around here, or whatever. Sure, yeah. But engaging younger generations in big families that have lots of money is very important. Otherwise, you lose it when the generation that you knew and had the relationship with, if it's all about relationships, that doesn't change. If you don't have a relationship with the younger generation, they're going to give the money to the places where they have relationships with. That's mom and dad's thing. Yeah.
My best advice is, if you take a look at all of these a-thons, there's a lot of them, right? From Penn State's thon to the AIDS ride-a-thon that goes between San Francisco and California, or South and Los Angeles. Those things are very popular, especially with the younger group, because there's camaraderie. They know where the money's going. They're very good at these things. The charities. It's not just asking for money. They've made it more. They've made it more. It's an experience. They've made it more, and so that'd be my biggest advice. Yeah. The younger group is a hard nut to crack because it's to treat people the way they want to be treated. So, you know, what do I expect from a donor or as a donor, and then what do they expect as a donor? The donor's always right. So, sure. No, it's okay.
So we talked a lot about the major donors, but how about the small donors? Like, how do we treat them? Like the $5, the $50, $25, $100.
So I would say that everyone gets a thank you note, right? And I know that's probably a very modest thing. There's organizations out there that just do some amazing, amazing work with small donors. And again, if you want some good examples, I can probably give them to you. And in this case, it's all about computer work. You know, they just have this great computer that bounces things out when they're supposed to, and they do the right newsletters at the right time, and they just So if you're a large organization, let's say you're a college, and you get $100 for the science department, and all of a sudden, all you're doing is sending this donor everything about the theater department, and they don't, you know, No, you've got to, I would say for small donors, it's all about really good computer work. And I think really good computer work, who here thinks they have really good computer work? Yeah, no, we're not good at that. We have kind of not done that real well. But when you see it done well, you know it. When you see, there's a charity that I give a little bit of money to every year. Didn't get lunch, by the way. But it's actually, I probably did get lunch. But their computer work, phenomenal.
Yeah, that's why sometimes an outside vendor can help you because they have the know-how to do it. And the other thing too is you treat everybody, you know, equally, maybe differently, but equally, because most people, their first gift to an organization is $50 or $100 or $200 or whatever.
I'm sure you can both tell stories about the raffle ticket. Once a year raffle ticket owner, when we get $10,000 in the will.
Yep.
It's happened to us.
Happens all the time.
Every year, all the time.
For planned giving, the best possible prospect, if you're looking at big groups of numbers, are people that give you $50 to $100 every year and never miss a year. Not the person that gives you $50,000. It's that person who they didn't have any kids, they never got married, they live in the family homestead, they had a great retirement, and they wind up dying, leaving 50% to you and 50% to the nieces and nephews.
And by the way, sister, my silver circle, it's in. So yeah, all right, there you go. So last question. Last question, in the back.
Just a very quick question. So
hypothetically, you're embarking on a capital campaign, and then that donor ends up writing from that $500 check with an active, cabinet or board ask a $30,000 check. However, how do you, that donor, that $500 donor was your biggest sponsor of your event, right? It's based on small sponsorship. And they just did a 3 to 5 year pledge. It's just a situation that I never quite, I want to make sure that it's handled correctly, especially when you're writing out 3 to 5 year pledges for a huge amount. You kind of always counted on them for that yearly annual appeal and those special event fundraisers, and a lot of times it would be the same people, and at least my situation.
So I'll be really fast about this. So my neighbor across the street used to give the University of Scranton annual fund about $1,000 a year. And then he decided to do a scholarship. And he ended up giving, in 1 year, he gave, let's say $10,000. That year that he gave the next year he didn't give anything. So 1,000 for many years, and then 10,000, and then nothing that next year. We didn't invite him to the big scholarship, or to the big $1,000 donor dinner, because he didn't make a gift. And so, because I lived across the street from him, he said, Paul, she knows who it is, Paul, come here. And I went over, and he's a lovely guy. Was a lovely guy. He passed away. But I don't know which one's mine. But then he said, if you want me to, I won't give any more money, like big gifts like that, if that would be helpful. And I said, no, that's okay. That's okay. We like the big gifts too. And so I think that's a tough one. I think that's an individual call, and I think you have to sort of make sure that they get the credit for the 1,000. So one of the big things that we're recommending that organizations do, especially small organizations, instead of having the fundraiser of the week, there's something every week that here's a ticket, here's a golf thing, here's a dinner, don't forget about the big event, don't forget this, here's your annual fund. Go to them once a year, talk to them and say, how about if you give us $1,500 and you're in for everything? And then go to see them again in another year and say, how about $2,000 and you're in for everything? And you kind of create a relationship with them instead of the constantly being hit. Anyway, thank you guys very much. You've been a great audience. Appreciate your help. Yeah. If I haven't answered your question, sorry.